Hey guys, so in this series with multiple parts, you will learn how to create a first-person shooter completely from scratch. And so in part 1, in this episode, we are going to take care of the first-person character movement, and we will completely create this from scratch. So I can move around, I can look around, and yeah. And so yeah, it's very basic, but it's the foundation of every first-person shooter. And so if you have ever used Unity before, you probably know that in the asset store you can actually download an FPS controller from Unity for free. And there's nothing wrong using the first person controller from Unity, but at some point you should also understand how to create a first person controller completely on your own. And that's why I decided to do this on our own instead of using the template from Unity. And yeah, we will take care in the first episode here of the very foundation to move around and to look around. Now, if you have been a subscriber to my channel, you probably know that I normally do web-related stuff, but I want to expand on that because I also want to do game development-related tutorials. So I will upload them here on this channel, but maybe at some point I will create a separate channel for that. Now, to be able to follow this tutorial, make sure to head over to unity.com, click on Get Started, and then make sure to click here on individual and then simply download the free personal plan. Now, once you have done that, you can launch the Unity Hub, and the Unity Hub is like a new platform that Unity just released, and here you can basically manage your project versions. So here, if you click on the installs, you have all the, you can manage your Unity versions. If you click on learn, you can learn more about Unity. So there are free tutorials you can follow along, which are also pretty awesome. And then under projects, you can manage your projects. And so let's click here on new, and I already have created my project, so I will not create another one. If you want to use the same name as I did, I just simply use first person character tutorial. So if you want to use the same name, simply type in here first person character controller. Make sure to select 3D, which is selected by default actually. And once you have given your project a name, click on create, and I will pause the video here because this takes sometimes a little bit longer, and I will start again once it's finished. So see you in just a moment. Alright, so now that Unity is finished, let's start by clicking here on this plus icon. Then let's go to 3D object and let's create a new plane. And so this plane will act as our ground for now. So let's rename that quickly to ground. And then I will also create another object, and this time we will take the capsule. And then let's click on the capsule and let's make sure to rename it to player. And then we also want to make sure that it's at the Y position at 1. Okay, and so with that we make sure that it's just slightly above our ground. And then let's click here on add component and let's add a rigid body. And then we can minimize that for now. And then I will create a new script called player move. Okay, let's hit enter. And so normally this will also automatically attach the new created script to the object where we have added the new component. And there we go. And so if we double click on that, this will open up Visual Studio. And so here at the top, let's create a new serialized field and then a float called speed. And for now, we will set the speed just to 5 so that we have a standard value. And then inside update, let's create a new function called move, like so. And then we need to create this function. So down here we say move void, and then I will create a new float called h, and this will be equal to the get axis horizontal. And then we will repeat that for the vertical input. So here we will say get axis vertical. And if you have never used Unity before, or if you're not quite sure what this is doing, so we can quickly console log that or debug log that. So I will just log the horizontal input. And so if we go back now to Unity, and we need to wait here quickly until it compiles. There we go. Now we can click here on play. And if I head over here to the console tab, you see we have now here always 0. Okay, so we are debug logging the h value, the float value. But if I press A, you will see it goes down slowly to -1, and then it stays there. And if I release the A button, it goes back to 0, almost 0. And the same happens if we press D, although this time it goes up to 1 instead of to -1. And if I release it, it goes back to 0 again. Okay, and the same happens with the V value. Okay, and so we can manipulate that now. We can add here our speed floats and then time.delta time to smooth out the value. So we will repeat this here for the vertical input as well. And now we have two values, and they are now we can now basically increase the speed, how fast it goes to 1 or -1 and so on with the speed. Okay, and we have this value here. And the next thing we need to do is to create kind of like a new vector tree. Okay, so we'll call this player velocity, or let's call it, yep, player velocity makes sense. Velocity, there we go. And so this will be a new vector, and here we will add for x the h input, for y 0, and then for z we will add the vertical input. And then we can take the player velocity and make this equal to transform direction and then we add here the player velocity. And this kind of like makes sure that we always use the local orientation that our current player has. I will talk about this in just a moment. Then let's create another variable where we take the rigid body that we currently can't access. So before we do that, actually, let's add here a private rigid body, and then we'll just assign the RB variable to it. And inside start, we will just grab it from the component, since we have attached the rigid body inside Unity. So we attach here the rigid body component, and with that we are able to grab that get component. Okay, and start is initialized whenever we hit play inside Unity. Okay, so now that we have reference to a rigid body, what we can do now is I can create a new variable and call it velocity change. And then we can take basically the player velocity that we have here at the top and make this minus the velocity, rigid body velocity. And this will give us back a difference between these two. And this will be then used to apply the force. Okay, actually we can do this right now. We can say RB RB add force, and then we say velocity change, and here we add for the force mode velocity change. And with that we should be already able to move our character. Okay, so if I hit here play, our character will probably move very slowly because of the low inputs. And let me quickly resize here the camera so that I can see my player. So I press on W S and nothing happens. So let me increase the speed to 150. And it seems like still nothing happens. Yeah, right. The problem is that we need to do this here differently. So let me quickly remove that here. Instead of assigning that to here, what we can do instead is we can take the player velocity like so, and then we can multiply this with the speed and the time.delta time. Alright, so with that we should be now finally able to walk around. And I think if we add here a value of 150, that this will be much better than just 5. And it seems like my camera is still offset, so one more time. Seems like I did that when I was in play mode, so Unity would not save the changes I made. Alright, and yeah, something is at least happening, but our player just went completely off. So the problem that we currently have is we add the velocity to our rigid body, but this will be then also applied to the rotation, okay, and this is why we get this weird behavior. So if we click on the player, we can open up here the rigid body drag menu or drop down menu, and here where it says constraints, we can limit that, okay. So I will limit basically in all directions the rotation, because at least until we like need it later on, I don't think we really need a rotation in any direction here. So if I press now S, you see it kind of works. Still looks a little bit weird, right? But we have at least some input in our characters. We got at least some kind of result back, but this is kind of like super hacky, right? So let's try to change this here to fixed update. And I will also, I guess, remove for now the time.delta time. I think the issue is coming because or from there. So if I press now A, D, or whatever kind of button, yeah, kind of works. Our player's a little bit too fast now, so let's decrease the speed value to maybe 15. And there we go, our character is now moving around and looks also really smooth to me. And yeah, everything is working, right? Okay, we got that down. So the first thing I want to do now is to save the scene and also save the project, just in case we get a crash or something like that, so that we don't lose our changes we made. And so I will quickly clean up this here a little bit, because the next thing we will do is to add a rotation so that we can rotate our character around. But before we do that, we need to take care of our main camera, because now we can walk around or move around our player, but at the same time our camera is not really following our character, right? So that's not really like what we know from a first person controller or character. So there are many ways to achieve that, to make the camera follow the player, but the most straightforward way is actually to just drag and drop the camera to the player. And now, since that is apparent, we can reset that, and then I will change the value here in the Y direction to 0.5. And with that, the camera will be always attached to this position and will follow the player. So if I hit now play, you see that I can now move around and the camera follows us, okay? Which is pretty awesome. Now let's make sure to change here the value again to 15. All right. And we also have a little problem, and that is that our character is kind of like floating if we really move fast around. That's because we have to zero out the velocity of our rigid body, because whenever we accelerate the rigid body, it tends to like bump up a little bit, okay? And I think this is why it looks a little bit hacky sometimes, or laggy. So here, just on the player velocity, we can say, actually down here we can say RB velocity Y is 0. Okay, I think with that we should fix this. Okay, we cannot directly adjust that. Actually, we can take it from the velocity change Y and set it to 0. Yeah, this way it would work. So now when I hit play, we should be able to move the character around. And this kind of like small issue that we had, our character appeared to be a little bit flowing, should be now gone, which seems to be the case. Alright, that looks smooth to me. I guess we can now try also to add quickly here time.delta time. Time.delta time. Maybe we can smooth out the movement even more, but because we added that time, we need to increase the speed value again. Otherwise, our character will be moving really slowly. All right. I think that's okay. I'm happy with that. If you don't want to use time, you can feel free to remove it because it doesn't really change the code itself. You just need to adjust the speed value if you want to do that. I will save the project one more time. And now let's take care of the player rotation. Okay, so I will create here another function, and let's call this one player rotation side. I think this way we know immediately what this function does. And so let's make sure to add that here to the fix update function. And then inside here I will create again another float, and this one will be called actually before we create this float here, let's go here to the top and let's create here a private float called rotate y. And then down here I can take rotate y and I can say plus equals to, maybe I just use equals to input get axis mouse x multiplied by rotation y speed. So we need to create this variable since it currently doesn't exist, and then we multiply it by time again. And so let's quickly create this variable here so we can use it. Actually I would just copy this here, paste it in, and we just change the name here to rotation y speed. Okay, and we'll also change this here to 150 since I want to use 150 as a standard value. Okay, and then down here we can basically apply that to our character rotation. So I can say transform rotate, and then here I will add 0 in the x direction. In the y direction I would say rotate y, and in the z I will 0 it out as well. And that should be actually it. That's actually all we need to do in order to rotate our character. So once I hit play here, we should be able to rotate to the left and right side based on my mouse inputs. And as you can see, that's the case. Now, however, we need to increase the value here to maybe 50. All right, much better. And there we go. It already works. We can rotate, and notice how our player is always moving to the direction we are currently facing. Okay, so whenever I press W and move the mouse around, you see it always follows the direction we are facing forwards, right? Now this is because we said here, said earlier that we come back to this. We said here transform direction player velocity, and this makes sure that we are basically always using the input for the local forward direction. Okay, without that we would always walk in the world y direction. Okay, so this is obviously the world y direction, and no matter where we would look to, okay, if we for example would look to this direction here or to the opposite direction and press W, our character would still just move in the z plus direction, the world direction. Okay, but with the transform direction, we're basically telling Unity, hey, whenever we are moving the character to any direction, and this is the forward direction we want to go. Okay, and that's why we can always move forward, or a character is always walking towards our direction we are looking at. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, I'm pretty happy with that, but again we need to change here the value, otherwise Unity won't save it. So whenever you make changes while you are in play mode, They will be applied, but they will be not saved. Okay, so you need to make sure to stop the game and then adjust the values, otherwise it won't be saved. Okay, I can walk around, I can look around, still a little bit hacky, but other than that, kind of works, right? So how can we fix this kind of laggy movement from our camera? Well, the problem is that the camera is directly attached to the character, and this causes this issue oftentimes. So what we'll do, we just create an empty here, and then we drag and drop the main camera to the game object, and then make sure to drag and drop the game object to the player. And to make this even more obvious, we can also rename that to camera holder. Okay, and with that, this hacky movement from a character should be gone. There we go. Looks already much smoother, so that was the issue. And yeah, we are definitely getting there, right? We can walk around, it looks already good. Looks really smooth if you ask me, and we can kind of like already, well, walk around like in a typical FPS. So we save everything again, and then we will take care of the inputs to look up and down, because currently we can't do that. So back to our code editor here, I will say void player rotation up down. I think this way it's also really obvious what we are doing here. Make sure to add that to the fixed update method, so player up down. All right, and then here we will almost do the same as here with just a few changes. Okay, so first off, let's just create or copy that here. Actually, we don't need to copy anything, we can just type in here rotate x, and then down here I would say rotate x plus equals this time, instead of just saying equal. I would say input get axis, and this time we want to grab the y axis from our mouse input, and then I would say rotation x speed, and again we need to create this as well. So let's go here to the top, copy that, and let's change this to x. And then instead of just applying that to transform rotate, what we need to do is to clamp the value. But actually, let's just apply this for now to the character, so that you can see what I mean with that, or why we need to do that. So if I just use the transform rotate like so, and add this here to the x value and zero out everything else. Actually, I did a mistake here. So before we even compile this, we need to grab the camera for that. Okay, we need to grab the camera to apply this. So here at the top, let me quickly create a new serialized field, and this one will be camera, and then we will call this one main cam. And then inside start, I would say main cam equals to the camera main. Okay, so with that, we make sure that we always grab the main camera. And so instead of saying now transform rotate, I want to apply that to the main cam dot transform. Okay, so let's go back now to Unity, and you see that we will be able actually to rotate our camera now, or our player view up and down. As you can see, it kind of works. I think we need to increase the value here also to maybe 80. So as you can see, it works, right? I can look up and I can look down. So no worries here, right? But the problem is now if I like move it up and up and up and up, you see we are going beyond the 90-degree angle. The same happens if I scroll or move my mouse upwards. You see we can just rotate 360 degrees, and obviously that's not something we want, so we need to limit that movement. And so instead of using a transform rotate, we will directly apply it to the angle. Okay, and we can do that by saying by just creating a new float, and let's just call this one clamped rotation, and here we will use mathf clamp, and then we will clamp. As you can see, we can add here the float value that we want to clamp, and then we can add a minimum and a maximum. So here I would say rotate X, which is the value you want to clamp, and then I will add here minus 90 and 90. Okay, and here we need to add now a plus sign, okay, to make this really work. So we have done that, and then we need to refactor this here as well. So instead of saying main cam transform rotate, I would say main cam transform rotation, and this will be equal to a new quaternion Euler, and here I would simply add the clamped rotation. And for these values here, what we need to do is we need to take the value that we have from our player. So you can say transform Euler angles Y, and then transform Euler angles Z. Okay, this way we will make sure that all the other transformations or rotations are taken from our player character. And in fact, we don't even apply any rotation to Y and Z to our player, so they will be always at 0. Okay, and now let me increase the X speed here from the rotation again. If I go now down, you see we no longer can go further than 90 degrees, and the same happens when I go up. Okay, right, so this is all working, and we can move around. Yeah, let me quickly double check everything, how our scene looks like. Okay, we just move here the game tab to right side, so on the left side you can now see the character, and yeah, it's working, right? We can move around, we can look down, we can look up, and so on. Now you might ask, how can we switch or mirror the input, because currently when I move the mouse up, we will look down, I think, right? So if I move up, we will look down. If I move down, we will look up. If I move the mouse up, we will look down, and if I move the mouse down, we will look up. So how can we reverse that, right? Just in case we don't want to have that. Well, what we need to do is say minus here, and with that we should already have reversed this value. So now if I move the mouse up, our character should also look up. There we go. And if I move the camera down, should also move down. So again, right. And we can also make this a bool to make this more dynamic. So here at the top I can say serialize field and bool inverse camera, and by standard we will say it's false, so it will be minus. So here I would say, hey, if what do I call it? Inverse camera. So inverse camera. So if this is set to true, I want to use a different value. Okay, I want to say, hey, we want to use the input without the minus. But if this is not turned on, we will just run this code here. Actually, we need to add an else statement here as well, I think, just to make sure we don't run the comment down here. Okay, so first of all, you should notice that we have now here a checkbox that we can click, and if I click on play, we should still get the same behavior. If I move the camera up, we can look around like that, but if I click the checkbox, it should be now reversed, okay, which is the case. Awesome. So we have done that, and this is basically all for today's part 1 or episode, or however you want to call that, because with that we have basically all the basics down. Now in the next episodes we will add footsteps, because when we play now or hit play and move around, we have no sound or whatsoever. And we will also add in the next episode the function to be able to jump, because that's something we can do as well currently. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked the video, if you have learned something, make sure to like it, make sure to subscribe. If you have any suggestions, use the comment section. And yeah, other than that, as always, thanks for watching, and see you maybe next time. Bye.